Here's the intro.
Greetings all who are currently watching this video. Welcome back and welcome, first maybe, today's review show. Indie games. Games that are typically made by smaller game studios. These games are usually made with a much smaller budget compared to bigger AAA type studios. That's not to say they don't put in a ton of work or they're not as good as the big companies. There's quite a few indies out there that are on par with, if not better than a lot of AAA games. The others, well over half of them are samey looking pixel art games or just games in general that blend in with one another. Not all pixel art games are the same, but most are. But what about the even smaller studios? These guys nowadays release really cheap or sometimes free Steam, mobile device, or Switch games. Okay, on Switch they're almost never free. But back then, if they weren't on computers, they'd make games for the cheapest side of the console giants. I don't really know the names of these types of companies, but without doing any real research, I'll just call them mini indies. You had things like the indie games section of Xbox 360 where you can only play them online even though you bought them, so it was a bit of ahead of its time there. You had WiiWare and eventually DSiWare on the Wii and DSi, and the ones we'll be talking about today, PlayStation Minis. I don't know for sure if these were meant to compete with the other consoles' mini indie game collections, but I wouldn't be surprised if they weren't. These PlayStation Minis, or simply Minis, are compatible with PSP, PS3, and PS Vita. While I did play these on my PS3 for this video, you can definitely tell these were made with the PSP in mind. More specifically, these were made with the PSP Go in mind, as that system was digital only. As far as I know of, only a handful of the companies that made these games went on to make bigger games. There are a little less than 300 of these, but today we're only looking at 15. Trust me, it won't take that long to talk about these as individuals. Some more than others, but you understand. The first game we'll look at today is 5-in-1 Arcade Hits, which was released in 2010. A lot of these were arcade-like games, with some having arcade in the title. As you know, this character here is the main star. I'm kidding, she's literally just on the cover and in the menus. Yeah, they're not even hiding the fact that this was made for PSP. Oh, you know this is gonna be good when there's that generic 70s style public domain sounding theme music for this 2010 game that has nothing to do with the 70s.
Shaka-laka is still cool for the kids to say, right?
In this game we have 5 mini-games. Pairs is just that matching card game where you get points for matching 2 of the same cards. There's a lot, but it's really not that challenging here. Alright, I did it! Anytime you want to move on. Anytime now. Yep, it just stays there until you hit a button. 15 puzzle is... I hate these types of games. Slide the numbers into the right spots in a very annoying way. Pull is just... pull. To be specific, it's 8-ball pool, but there's nothing really special about it. Solitaire is just solitaire. If you like solitaire, then you should like solitaire. I never could get into this game, it's just boring to me. And the last one is Tetroid, which I really thought was going to be a Tetris clone. But turns out, it's a sideways breakout. At least it looks and somewhat plays unique, but overall, it's okay. There's not really much else to do, I mean you do have achievements to unlock, but other than that, there's nothing else. This game is doable. I mean, this game is pretty cheap, but it does kind of feel like you get what you paid for. If this is, for some reason, your only option to play these types of games, then it's passable. Otherwise, you're not really missing much if you skip this one. Now it's time to talk about a tiny game that went nowhere and is mostly forgotten about. It's a little one-off game known as Angry Birds. Haha, see, fold ya, tee-hee. Anyway, this version of the game was released in 2011, I think? Well, when I look it up, it says it was released in 2009, but the copyright year on here says 2009 through 2011, so I'm not sure. Maybe this version had updates up to 2011, but that's weird for a minis game to have updates. Well, if you remember what Angry Birds looked like back in 2011 to a certain point, then you should know how this plays. The only real difference is there's no touchscreen, so you use a joystick to aim and a button to fire. Other than that, and the fact that there are no ads, it's the same 2011 version of the game. For those of you who actually don't know what this game is about, which might actually be a higher number than it was back then, Angry Birds started out as a clone of Crush the Castle. Both games have you launching a ball-like object at a castle or tower to defeat the enemies. So it's kind of a reverse tower defense situation. The gameplay is simple and easy to understand. Launch a bird at the pigs until they're all gone. The less birds you use against them, the more points you get at the end. But if you've used all your birds and at least one pig is still around, then you have to start the level over. Simple enough, but as you can imagine, the later levels get pretty hard. In some levels you get these golden eggs. I never really looked up what they do, but they're here. There is a story here. The pigs took the birds' eggs and now the birds are angry. So that's why you're launching these pissed off peckers, to save the eggs at any cost. Eventually more types of birds are introduced, which have more abilities, but I only got to the small blue birds level before I quit. Like I said, these levels get pretty hard. I'm sure I could have won eventually, but I have a show to do, so I couldn't take forever. One more thing to mention is if you watch the credits all the way through, you get another golden egg. That's special. So yeah, that was the PlayStation Mini's version of Angry Birds. This isn't really the best version of the game, but it is still fun to play this way. While this was the only Angry Birds game to get a Minis version, some of the other games came out on various consoles, including PlayStation systems. In fact, there's actually a PSVR exclusive game based on the second Angry Birds movie. But anyway, Angry Birds Minis is fine. The next game is Arcade Air Hockey and Bowling, 'cause why not? This one was released in 2009, as a lot of these were, considering minis were launched in 2009. I'm just so confused. Wow, someone really needs to check on this clock. Let's select our avatar, featuring these beautiful renders of humans. There's just so many of these wonderful men and women to choose from. So I chose the alien. We have a few different modes here, but I just went with the basics. There are some customization options, mostly for air hockey. What a lovely scenery that we mostly don't see when playing. Well, if you've played almost any bowling game on a console that didn't have motion controls, then you've basically played this game. I mean, it's somewhat different, but it's just basic bowling. Though it's really annoying when the ball is almost completely straight, yet it manages to go really far off to the side. I don't think they thought that all the way through. And even though I was on easy mode, I think, the opponent still managed to kick my ass. I don't think it's just because I suck at bowling, I just think that they didn't seem to know what easy was. But anyway, that was the bowling side of the game. How about the air hockey side? Well, the controls are really sensitive, and because things look smaller, I thought I would suck at this one too. Turns out, I'm an expert. Against a rookie. I won 5-0. So, I was able to win a game with sensitive controls, but I lost a game with better-ish controls. What is my life? Well, other than being able to change the environment, unlock new stuff, and play with others, there's not much to this game. What you see in the title is what you get, air hockey and bowling. I feel like this game was a result of one side of the development team wanting bowling while the other side wanted air hockey, so they decided to put them both in one game. It feels kind of awkward too, because usually you'll see a collection of these types of games with like 3 or more. You could say that means they put more work into it since this is just 2 games, but it doesn't feel that way. It's another you get what you paid for feeling game. I wouldn't really go out of my way to play this one, even if I was a huge fan of both of these games. Next on the list is Arcade Darts. Like I said, there's many of these that have arcade in the title. This one was released in 2009. Possibly, I don't know for sure. Well, the same people who made the previous game made this one, so we'll know it's gonna be great. This time it's just one game, so maybe they did focus more on making it feel better. We have some of the same character from before, I guess. I went with Aussie Calypso here. This game controls not so great. I'm sure they were wanting to go for the realism of human pressure, but they just didn't execute it very well. I was never really into these 301, 501, and 701 game modes. I just like the standard highest score wins type of modes. But if you've played any of these dart games before, you know what to expect here. This is usually how you see dart games, either as part of a collection of games, a mini game, or a standalone mini indie game. There's not that many interesting things you can do with regular darts. so this one just bored me. Not much else to say, it's just a boring game overall. Like before, if you like these types of games, you might like this one, but there are better options out there. The next game is, I swear to, Arcade Essentials. This one was released sometime between 2009 and 2011 or 12 or whenever they stopped releasing these. This is like the 5-in-1 game where it has 5 games in one. All games here are just newer but low budget versions of old games. Interceptor is just a Galaga clone. It has some uniqueness to it, but not much. Terra Conqueror is just Kicks with 3D graphics and the same chip model. This one is actually pretty fun, but only because I like Kicks. Like before though, there's not much that's unique about this one versus the original. Color Sales is just Puzzle Bobble with the same looking graphics and colors as the rest of this game. Most of you who played Bubble Shooter back in the day will see this as a clone of that, but you know. Troops Attack is Missile Command, but easier and the same song and dance as the others. And Hexagonum, however you pronounce that, is Cubert, but is actually quite different. Well, the shape of the level is different at least. At least they did something more unique with this one. But overall, these are just those old arcade games with a different skin and some things change here and there. You'd be much better off playing these games in their original states elsewhere. But if this is your only choice, you could sort of do worse. Sort of. Now it's time for the highly anticipated sequel to the previous game. Arcade Essentials Evolution. Basically, it's the same concept but with different games. You can guess at this point when it might have been released. Like the previous game, these are all clones of old arcade games. Vulcanoids is Asteroids, but actually better looking. Asteroids is such a primitive game that almost any level of graphical upgrade will make it look better. There are better looking ones out there, but this one isn't bad. Toader? Are you freaking serious? Toader is Frogger. I'm sure you couldn't guess that one. Honestly though, this feels a bit watered down. Not from gameplay changes, rather it just doesn't look as good. Maybe it's the colors or something, but it just doesn't look as good. But in terms of gameplay, it's doable. I'd just rather play the original. Scolopendra is Centipede/Millipede with, well, you know at this point. Smash Out is Breakout, and Lunar Parking is Lunar Landing. Overall, I'm not sure if I'd consider this one better or worse than the first one. They both have shameless rip-offs of classic arcade games, so I guess it just depends on which ones you like most. So yeah, like before, I'd only recommend this if it's your only option to play these games. Both of these feel like those cheap games your parents would get when you ask for a real game. Now that we're finally done with the arcade games, let's take a look at Smashy Blocks. Release date, info, you know, let's go. Boy, you guys sure were an icon for making these cheap games, weren't you? Smashy Blocks is pretty much a mix of Breakout and Soccer. So to win, you either have to break all the things or get your ball in the goal. Honestly, this is kind of fun. Nothing spectacular, but I can see myself playing this if I'm bored. It may not be all that original, but it's a fun concept. One of the big parts of this game though is the level editor. It's simple enough, you can place where the breakables go, where the enemies go, and how the background looks. I created this beautiful level on my own. Thank you. Not really much else to say about this one, but I thought it was a good game. Smashy Blocks takes an old game and does something sort of unique with it. It's overall a good game, and if you like Breakout and creating, then this should be a good one for you. Who's ready for this amazingly titled game? The name of the game is Blimp. The Flying Adventures. This one sounds pretty original, so maybe the gameplay will reflect that. Alright, wow, this story was a little more intense than I was expecting. Gosh, if the story is this intense, what's the gameplay like? Pretty sure I'm supposed to move in more directions. I was a little confused on what to do at first. Almost as if I needed to do a tutorial or something. But once I figured it out, I found the game to be meh. I mean, it's unique, but that doesn't mean it's good. You go back and forth through the level, delivering these guys to different locations while trying to avoid bumping into things. Sometimes you pick up boxes and deliver them, but it's the same thing. At the very least, the scenery does change per level, but it's just kind of boring. It feels like the minigame of a game from the 2000s that we all hated and couldn't wait to get over with. It's like that, but it's the whole game. I only got to level 3 before I was done. I know, I shouldn't judge a whole game based on 3 of many levels, but it feels like it wouldn't get that much better. I mean, it's really not bad. It's just boring as all, but sometimes that can be worse than bad. I've played worse, boring games, but still, this one's not for me. Time to head back to Pool with this solo game of Doodle Pull. Now you'd think this would be just the same game as the one from Arcade Hits, just with a different look, and you'd be right, for the most part. It's basically the same thing, just with cel-shaded graphics, but I mean, Pool is still fun, guys. This one does have more modes at least. But I will hate Dude forever, cause I was so close to winning until he knocked the 9 ball and got 5 more points than me.
Have you ever wondered why we never hear from Dude again?
Anyway, we have the 9 ball game and the 2 versions of the 8 ball game, US and UK. I feel like the UK version is more child friendly, as it's easier to tell what colored balls you need to hit rather than saying hit the ones with or without stripes. But yeah, overall, a decent pool game. I wouldn't go out of my way to play this one, but it's not a bad choice. There are much better choices, but you wouldn't go wrong with this one. The next game is Family Games. This is not one that will be easy to find unless you type in very specific words to find it. Why would they go with such a generic title? This menu is kind of a mess. I guess it goes along with the doodle look to it, but still. Anyway, this is the same thing as past games on this list, renamed versions of other games. This time though, they're based more on board games and such. One thing that is interesting is that to determine who goes first, you play a game of rock, paper, scissors. So, play a game to play a game. Battlefleet is Battleship. This game of strategy is one I'm not always good at. Squares is... I don't remember the real name. I have played this before in other games. You basically try and fill up a square, one line at a time, before your opponent does. Matchsticks... I didn't know what the heck I was doing. I think I was just tired at that point. Now, if you don't know what Hangman is, you probably don't exist. They do actually have some categories on different subjects and words, so at least there's that. You can also create your own. 4 in a row is Connect 4, but you have a choice of how many you want to connect in the settings. Morris... I don't like Morris. Every version of this I've played, it feels like the AI always has the upper hand. Noughts and crosses... Wait. Noughts and crosses? Why would they ever call tic-tac-toe noughts and crosses? What the hell is a knot? They could have chosen so many other names like X's and O's or something. Why noughts and crosses? Well, I'll tell you why. That was the original name. Anyway, you may not know what tic-tac-toe is if you're from another planet. Safecracker, I understand how it plays, kind of. I just suck at it. Guess the right combination before the numbers reach the top. And the final game here is... multiplayer? Like I said, this menu's a mess. Safecracker was the last one. This game is harmless enough and it could be enjoyed by the family. I wasn't a big fan of all these games, but it was fine enough overall. Now that we've finished one family game, it's time to move on to another. Some other time, because now we're looking at Hysteria Project. This is quite an interesting one because it's not your typical minis game. I'll explain when we get there. If you'd like to skip this one for some reason, I'll explain it like this. This is a pretty cool old YouTube video with QuickTime events. There's a tad more to it than that, but it's still pretty interesting. This is one of those FMV games where you have to select the right choices to progress. The story is hardly there at first. All you know is you're a dude who's been captured and duct taped up by this guy who's in a Grim Reaper type outfit. So picking the right choices helps this guy escape. For the most part, the only gameplay there is these QuickTime events where you have to press circle or X at the right time. And these moments where you have to select the right option to progress. Sometimes you'll get these H symbols that pretty much show you where you need to go. I don't know if they only show up at the beginning more or if they show up when you mess up a lot. But other than that, and like one puzzle and some of these being timed, there's not much of a game here. So as a game, it sucks because you don't do much at all. However, as a sort of interactive movie, it can be entertaining. Don't get me wrong, it's nothing great, but it's interesting. I called it an old YouTube video because that's what it feels like. What I like about it is that it feels like 2 or 3 friends got together and came up with this idea. They just fleshed it out and sort of made it into a game. I guess that's what's appealing to me about it, friends taking what little they have and making something interesting with it. The only real negative I have with the video itself is, well, as you can tell, it's pretty fuzzy. But that is kinda to be expected with something like this, I just wish it looked a little better. I won't say what happens at the end, but once you beat the game, there's a new option in the main menu. This is basically where you learn about the events leading up to the game. This was really cool and a nice reward for playing through the game. While this kinda sucks as a game and there are better options for games like this, I still really liked it. T-rated horror games are kind of hard to pull off, but this one is nice. I still wouldn't really recommend trying your best to play it, but I would definitely give it a watch. If you can get past the fuzziness, it should be fine. Well, that game did so well, we ended up with a sequel, Hysteria Project 2. There was a to be continued message at the end of the first game, so that was to be expected. Spoilers for my overall opinion of this game? I don't have one for the whole game. I'll explain when I get there. This game definitely had a bigger budget than the previous game. It also has an M rating this time, so it's a proper survival horror game. I said bigger budget, I didn't say big budget. Where the previous game felt like an interactive YouTube video, this one feels like that but with crowdfunding behind it.
You're completely exhausted.
This time around we actually see faces and hear voices, other than just grunts and breaths and demon sounds. What's also different this time around is the gameplay. This time it has point and click gameplay with puzzle elements. There are still FMV cutscenes of course, but there seems to be more of a focus on actual gameplay. It's not super engaging gameplay, but it's there. The story this time has you trying to escape what seems to be a mental hospital. Now why do I keep saying seems, and why do I say I don't have an overall opinion of this game? Well, that's because I got stuck on this moment here and I couldn't figure out the whole password to open this door. So because of that, I didn't play enough of the game to see what all this had to offer. Again, I have a show to do here, so I didn't want to spend too much time here. I do think the opening is quite interesting. If you want to know what the critics thought, well, they weren't too fond of it, according to Wikipedia. As for fans, well, I'm not too sure because I couldn't find much of that in the few seconds I searched. As for me, I'll have to play more to really judge it. Sorry if this one had a disappointing conclusion, I just wanted to include it because I played the first one. Now let's look at a more lighthearted game. Kind of. That game is Mini Squadron. Listen to that music. I guess this will be a peaceful game of flying around in a plane. No blood, so it's all fine. The whole point of this game is to shoot down various planes and other flight vehicles. Also shoot birds. Cool. Once you've completed a level by clearing out all waves of enemies, you unlock new levels. By completing certain tasks, you can unlock different types of flying vehicles, including enemy vehicles. Also yes, the music hilariously doesn't match to what's going on. You do have limited lives, so make sure not to die too much. There's also a survival mode for those who just want to play the same level for as long as they can. I thought you'd just have 1 life here, but you have the standard 3. Other than that, there's not much else to say here. Just shoot down enemies and birds to progress. It's overall an okay game. If you're into 2D plane games where you shoot down enemy planes, then you might like this one. It's simple, which is all someone might want, but as for me, it's just okay.
Get ready for this one, folks. I'm not sure if you are ready for one epic game.
No, that's actually the name of it.
A game so epic that any description here is useless.
Dude, shut your douchebag mouth.
Oh man, I sure am hyped now. This is gonna be the best thing ever.
It's an auto-scrolling platformer / shooter.
Radical.
Yeah, this game was made by first-time developers. Maybe. I mean, I guess you could say the name is ironic. I mean, they do break the fourth wall a lot after all. All you do in the game is run, jump, shoot zombies. That's it. Probably a little more to it, but I got kinda bored after the first few minutes. I did see where there were more levels, but I basically know what to expect. If you like this sort of thing, that's great. As for me, it's just there. And now, ladies and gentlemen, our final game of the video. Get ready for the impossible game. This is another one with a title that some have used before, but this one should be easier to find. Unlike One Epic Game, this name actually matches more. What kind of game could this be? Well, that's it. All you have to do in the game is jump at the right time. What makes this game impossible is just how difficult the game is. Obviously it's not really impossible, but I've never been able to get past the first level. The music is supposed to help you out if you can stay with the tune and beat of it. It's not really a rhythm game, the music just helps. There are 5 levels altogether, but like I said, I've never beaten the first level, so I don't know what the rest of the game is like. The game can be pretty addictive. There is a practice mode. If you press triangle, a flag is placed. This is your own checkpoint, so you start back there after you die. Just be careful where you place them. You can quit practice at any time in the pause menu. While this game looks like nothing, it sure is engaging. Overall, it's a fun game. This is probably my favorite out of the minis, which, to be honest, isn't saying much. But I do find it to be a really fun game. It's a shame the sequel never came to minis, but oh well. PlayStation minis overall, well, it's honestly hard to say how I feel about them as a whole. I did only play 15 out of 294 of them, but if the rest are anything like these games, then I'm glad I didn't get too invested in these. Well, I sorta did, considering I got a large number of them, it's just small compared to how many there are. Maybe there are more engaging ones like Doodle Pull or the Impossible game, or more interesting ones like the Hysteria Project games. But judging the list of games I played today, overall I kinda had a mediocre to okay time. I mean, these games were pretty cheap, so of course, what can I expect? But not all were mediocre, so I would come back to some of these. So like I said a few times, I wouldn't go out of my way to play these games, or at least not these versions of these games. But if you can still buy the good ones at this point in time, and you already have a PS3 or whatever PlayStation can play them, I'd say give them a try. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video, folks. Don't forget to like this video if you liked it, subscribe for more videos like this or any other types I make, and thanks for watching. Let me guess. I don't know how much more I could take of this, it's just